Welcome to the check-in where a couple of friends check in on their lunch breaks, hang out in cars outside of Walmarts in the middle of nowhere. Danielle Moody, it is so good to see you. How are you doing, my friend?
I, you know, uh, I reached out to you. I'll tell everybody. I Folks know now I was in Europe for a couple of weeks, taking a break from America, still working, but like taking a break and getting some distance. And Monday was a week since I came back. And I text Jared and I said, I don't know why I came back. And like, I am not doing well. And this place is a shit show. And I'm exhausted and my body hurts again. And I realized that my sickness is America. Like, America is making me sick. And we talk about this and have talked about it every week. But to have like, the deep like relationship and understand like I was doing this work like last week in a different country and felt completely different than I do this week doing the same work, but now back in America. And it's just like, I mean, I feel like the only, like, not, of course, with you, Jared, but like, I feel like we're the only sane people living inside of an insane asylum trying to convince those that hold the keys to our exit that we're sane and that this shit isn't normal. And that's like, it just on Monday, it just felt like, yeah, like I was drowning again. And I was like, oh dear God, this place is going to kill you.
Yeah, and by the way, you picked a good time to come back. I mean, I was thinking about that actually after you reached out, and it's an odd thing. I talked about how these things move in waves. How like there are times where like the authoritarianism kicks into full gear and it becomes more aggressive. There are other times where there's like a public backlash or a scandal and then it pulls back. It's the ebb and the flow of it. And something weird has been happening over the past couple of weeks, especially after you came back, which is there's a maddening sort of dichotomy that's happening here. We've paid attention to Donald Trump now for a decade. You and I have had to pay close attention to him to understand him. The man is fucking falling apart
Oh my
in,
God.
in real time, and I don't just mean
Yep.
physically. I mean emotionally, cognitively, all of it. He's falling apart. The Mad King phase of this thing is really taken off.
Amped
And
out.
and I didn't I it's weird because I am sure everyone watching or listening at some point or another has come across an authoritarian man. And there's something that happens with a dictatorial man where like they kind of mess with your perception of reality and you almost don't expect them to ever die. You don't expect them to ever sort of start to, fall apart like that. And especially someone like Trump, we've seen his health problems, we've seen his cognitive decline, all of that. But like he's one of those, it's like poison doesn't age, you
Yeah.
know? And so that Mad King aspect of this is like off the charts right now. It is one of the craziest things to see this person over 3 hours of being praised and insane rambles. And then meanwhile, what's also being revealed that if you paid attention, you've seen it, there is a complete apparatus behind him that is deadly and efficient and they know what they want. And so there's this weird back and forth between those two elements constantly. And it would be bad enough if we were in an authoritarian system, which we've been in one for a while. It's just been like more muted and hidden. But the fact that that is coming out in this like aggressive push while we're watching the figurehead literally melt in front of us. And the madness that you and I and all the rest of us who have paid attention to this, we've known he's been full of shit since we knew who Donald Trump was.
Right.
Back when he was a pop culture figure or, like a tabloid figure, whatever, everyone knew he was full of shit. When he became a political leader, we knew he was full of shit. Now it's this extra level of, oh my God, the cultists are absolutely just mainlining bullshit.
Yeah.
And they're trying to turn it through some sort of twisted alchemy into what makes sense or some sort of great leader thing. And then meanwhile, we all can feel that apparatus starting to really come online and make another push.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, I said this, Waj and I said this on Monday, where we said that the acceleration that we're feeling of Donald Trump's militarization and authoritarianism is interlaced with the fact that he is disintegrating before our eyes. The apparatus that you spoke of needs to accelerate this takeover because they know that he is unwell. And what they do know for certain is that those that decided to pledge their allegiance to Donald Trump and to follow this madman over a cliff, do not have the same allegiance and ties to JD Vance. They don't trust JD Vance. They don't like JD Vance. JD Vance has a brown wife and brown children, and they're rabid white nationalists. So they do not trust this man. Um, that being said, from the armchair doctors that that have been speaking over the last couple of weeks, they're like, yeah, he maybe has like 8 months, a year, like roll the dice. But I mean, we're seeing with our own eyes, this man doesn't look well. And if this were Biden, there would not be a day or a headline or an outlet that would not be aggressively interviewing doctors day in and day out to get to the bottom of this forward progression of his disintegration that we're seeing. So, like, I think that, and I've said for so long, that things in this country will continue to get increasingly bloodier before they get better. And I think that we are getting ready to hit probably one of the bloodiest moments in American history since like the Civil War, since the civil rights movements and the white nationalist driven riots that took over Black cities. And so I think that the anxiousness that I am feeling like in my body is a direct correlation to the acceleration that we are seeing. The funny thing is, and not funny, haha, that I am recognizing too, Jared, is that no one is meeting Donald Trump in the street where he wants them to meet. Like, he's rolling out these tanks and he has our National Guard picking up garbage in Washington, D.C. because they don't have anything to do. Nobody is meeting Donald Trump with tear gas and with like the robust physical resistance that he is seeking in order to have a reason to crack down and usher in martial law. And I'm curious as to what, like, because a part of me is like, I think that this may be the smartest approach that we could have, right? Is to allow it to very much allow Donald Trump to do what he's going to do, but not meet him toe to toe in this particular way, knowing that the response is going to be escalated militarism and martial law. What do you make of it?
Well, I want to say first things first, because I think that's a great question. I think it's a really good thing for us to discuss. I want to say I mentioned this on the Muckrake, maybe it was a week ago, something like that. And Danielle, you might know about this. During the Cold War, U.S. intelligence used to have these people. They called them Rushologists. They were people who watched what was happening in the Soviet Union and they looked for symbols and signals, right? Because there was such a totalitarian wall down away from power and sort of information. And so they would basically look for corresponding symbols and signals. The United States, we've talked about at length. We do not think of ourselves as any other country. We don't think of ourselves in any other context. So let's look at what's going on. We have a leader who is clearly in decline, who is really falling apart. Meanwhile, we're starting to see major urban areas filled with troops. It doesn't take like a trained USologist to look at that and say, oh, wow, they're escalating this thing pretty quickly. Something has happened here and some things are moving. If you looked at the USSR and a premiere wasn't seen in public for a couple of weeks and suddenly there were tanks outside of major areas, you would have questions. right? You would suddenly have to ask yourself, what are they kind of doing here? I think that escalation that you're talking about is correct. I think that they've had a plan for a very long time. They're escalating that plan. And on top of it, what happens in this country if a Donald Trump dies or a major constitutional protection is gotten rid of? What happens when those things occur? I'm bringing that up so people can be prepared. That's one of the things that we do as analysts is we try and let people know, hey, things might happen, so you need to just kind of have that possibility in mind. And I think I said it again on the last muckrake, like it really feels like the game board is taking shape, right? It really feels like a lot of these pieces are being moved into place. When it comes to strategy, I am of a couple of different minds because there's such a major psychic and spiritual component to having federal troops occupying cities. Like what it does to you, how it changes the way you look at regular society, whether or not that, like waiting that out versus confronting it is the right decision. And for me, I keep looking at the fact the only way we get out of this, I actually think, is an existential like showdown. I think it comes down
Yep.
to the people totalitarian government. That doesn't mean that you run off half cocked. That doesn't mean that you're an accelerationist. It means that we need to take a look at these things. And the most important part, Danielle, is something that we talk about often personally and communally, which is if we are in an activated state, we're not being rational. We're
Right.
not being reasonable. So if we're doing it out of fear, then we're going to make the wrong decisions. And these people have all of the benefits of state power on their side. We have to be able to take a second and find a center and find a grounding, take a look as things are and as they are developing, and start to figure out some type of a strategy. That isn't a person going out and confronting a troop. That's you and me and others coming together in coalitions and figuring out the best way to approach it together because otherwise we're just going to get outflanked. So I think it's a combination of the two things. And we have to get to some sort of a grounded state so we can even figure out what's going on and where we need to go.
I mean, for me, I feel like the grounded state is the fact that by the end of this year, their plan is to occupy every major city in the United States. The thing about that is what Wes Moore said over the weekend, the governor of Maryland, where he was just like, this is not scalable. Like what Donald Trump is doing is not scalable and it's untenable because of the cost, the amount of troops that is necessary in order to get this done. Um, and seemingly the courts to a certain extent that still, at least the lower courts, act as a pushback and have been pushing back. They push back in LA. There are court cases that are reeling now in Washington, D.C. to get Donald Trump to back down. D.C. is a particular case because of it being federalized anyway. But with New York, with Minnesota, with these other places that he is eyeing, these blue states that he's eyeing, like, I think that there is going to be, I don't think that he has the numbers. And so for us, this is why I continue to say that we need a national strike. The grounding that we have to have is in the coordination of a national strike, coordinated across industries, right? From union boss leaders to social justice organizations, to women's rights groups, to LGBTQ community organizations, to ability groups, etc. We need to have a massive national strike that begins to roll out, right? Industry by industry this fall, that by the time, in my humble opinion, that we get to Donald Trump's year mark in the presidency, that everyone is on strike. That's what I believe needs to actually happen. That's the grounding and the coordination. Instead of focusing on whatever your siloed issue is and how this administration is hitting it, is that you need to look at the totality of what is happening and put your siloed interests and issues aside and focus on the totality. And I think that if we do that, right? If we do that, which is in itself a nonviolent protest. Because what we're saying is if you have tanks in the streets, we're just going to stay home. And why I mean stay home, I mean we ain't working. We ain't going anywhere. So what are you going to do? Send the troops to drag us out into the street to beat us up, right? If we're deciding to stay home, if we're deciding on focusing on collective care for those that if they do miss a check, that could mean that they lose their housing, right? So what do we do for the most vulnerable that don't have savings, right? So this to me is the coordinated strategy that is needed. And I know that folks in the chat are talking about September 16th, which is one of the named days for an economic blackout, an economic boycott. But that's what I am thinking in terms of like what strategies I want to see put out and what I want to see people doing. And I don't even think it needs to be something that is said in public until it is coordinated. But that's what I believe.
I completely agree. I think a national strike has been what has been needed for years, actually. And that's the hard thing. I look at something like Roe v. Wade being struck down. There should have been a response to that.
Yep.
And there were like a couple of, there were a couple of moments of protest, and obviously people were pissed off. But that should have been, many moments before then, that should have been the moment. I wish something like BLM during the pandemic would have moved towards a national strike, but I think there were various reasons it didn't. And as we're talking about this, I want to point out, because the labor aspect of it, that's our power. That is 100% our power. It's not even consumerism is light power, right? Like not buying things, boycotting things, that's light power. Full power is labor power. It's the fact that they have erected a system in which they don't care about us personally. The only thing they care about is what kind of profit they can extract out of us. And for people who don't believe this is what's going on, Danielle, you just brought up the federal troops picking up trash. Okay, so we have more federal troops. We have ICE, which is its own army. I believe it would be the fourth or fifth largest army in the world at this point. You also have prisoners. You also have immigrants who have been absolutely kowtowed and made terrified to do anything. So, what is happening here? And almost in every one of these scenarios, when you track power, you track the way labor is being affected, because that is like the main sort of nut of it. What have they done? They have basically gotten rid of any ability for regular people to have jobs that can, catch the American dream. They've created debt that is so overwhelming. What's the carrot in most of these things? Debt relief, student debt relief. All of a sudden now you're creating employment that is completely and utterly anchored on loyalty to the state.
Yep.
You're not go on strike if you're doing that. You can't go on strike if you're a prisoner. You can't go on strike if you're an immigrant who's afraid of being sent to Uganda or El Salvador. So what has happened is one of the biggest and strong, and by the way, there's a reason they cleared out the federal government. They're going to end up hiring people who are loyalists who have to take loyalty tests.
Yep.
And it also needs to be mentioned, what is AI? AI isn't just the only product that can be offered by tech. It is an automation strategy. So it's going to carve out those white collar information jobs that are basically the only thing left of people who can pull themselves up. So where are they going to go? And people don't remember that fascism is about state sponsored and state cooperating capitalism. So what you just brought up, the idea of an actual national strike, I not only think that's the answer, Danielle, and we have to take care of all the particulars of it because we are in a more precarious position. But we also have to recognize something. That power that we have, that ability that we have to organize and go on strike, they're getting rid of that. They are getting rid of the jobs where we could go on strike. And
Yep.
one of the things we talk about in this cycle is if you're being herded into a cage, you have to do something before you get in the cage, before the door is shut. So a lot of the people who are like, I think this will eventually pass. We're losing our leverage. And we are in danger of losing that leverage in the long term. So people need to start having those rational conversations, those organizing conversations. But the first thing that we have to do is we have to ground so that we can engage in solidarity, we can engage in collective action. But time, it's ticking.
One of the things that people have been asking since I came back is whether or not I plan to leave and whether or not they should leave. And it is a question that I think comes up on a regular basis, particularly for those that have privilege. And I mean like a range of privileges to even be able to consider leaving as an option, right? And, I there is a place where the organizer in me wants and believes like, who do I need to call? Who do I need to contact? I'm not a movement leader, right? I'm not a campaign strategist. That's not the roles that I've ever held, right? At the same time, it's like I know that a national strike is the right way to move. At the same time, I also know that the violence that we are about to see is like nothing we've ever seen in the in modern times, right? And so there is also another part of me that's just like, fuck it, it's actually time to go. Like the alarm bells are going off in every part of my body, in every part of this country, and it's time to go. And so I'm wondering, when you are talking about for us and then for yourself grounding in this moment, how are you grappling with like that? Like I don't know if you have ever considered or are considering like what it means to, what it means to leave versus staying, but like how are you grappling with like all of the alarm bells that are kind of sounding off in our bodies right now?
What a great question. And by the way, I
Did we lose you?
uh,
Uh-oh, Jared. You're
and what I'll
frozen. The Walmart is not working. Am I frozen, folks, or is it just Jared that's frozen? Tell me. Seems like it. Just Jared. Okay. Let me text it. And everybody's like, it's Jared. And then Jared just drops up. He's gonna try and come back on. This is what happens when he is traveling and is dedicated to doing this show. So we will hope that Jared is able to rejoin. I'm going. Oh, here he comes. Um, there he goes. Hopefully he'll come back again. But I mean, folks, like this the question that I just asked Jared that I'm hoping that he will answer is a question that I'm asking everyone, which is how do you how do we grapple with this like internal instability that we're dealing with, which is this idea that, I continue thinking back to World War II when people recognized it was time to go. Did you move?
I didn't move, but who knows?
Okay. All right.
Okay, you
So
can
you're
hear me.
back and we can hear
Okay,
you now.
okay. At the risk of repeating myself, I don't know when I froze. I think one of the great things about this conversation that we're having is that, like I said, I think it was in the first or second episode. I think I said, we can be there for each other and figure this stuff out. And I'll say for me, when it comes to the idea of staying or leaving, I am a really, really stubborn person in this regard. This is my fucking country and they're not going to take it. And I'm not going to let them take it. I understand some people need to leave. I understand some people need to take care of themselves. I'm also, a white dude. It is what it is. But I will also say, as you are navigating this, or as other people are navigating it, it comes down to right now because you've re-entered this thing and because it sucks. You're in fight or flight. Like
Yeah.
that's what it is. And that doesn't mean that your calls for fighting because you're in a dysfunctional, dangerous situation, or your call to for flight because you're in a dangerous situation. It doesn't mean that either one of them is irrational. It means that being conflicted about that means that you need to be able to get into a grounded space
Yeah.
to figure out a decision because you don't want to make a decision that is based on what these assholes are doing. You want to make a decision that's based on what's best for you and the people you love and your future. And that's the hardest thing in all of this, because we're being asked to do 5 or 6 or 7 of the hardest things that we've ever done in our entire lives.
Yep.
And I will just make one more point off of what you said. And I've got this is a little bit of tough love for my friend, because we're hanging out on a stream. I'm talking to my friend. My friend just said, "I'm not a movement leader." Yes, you are. Yes, you are. And I'm sorry to tell you that, and that's the tough love, because you absolutely are a leader. And your voice is important. And every single day, hundreds and thousands of people hear what you have to say and your analysis, and they understand what's going on. Like, you do have a place in that. And I'm sorry that history has burdened you with that. I don't like the burden that history has given me. I don't want this yoke. I don't want to deal with this either, but you absolutely are. I'm terribly sorry for that bad news. But
I'm like,
but you
why
are,
can't you keep it to yourself?
because we're friends and we're actually honest with each other. And I'm so sorry to tell you, you are a leader, and that's where we are.
Yeah, I think that, when I listen to you and you say, like, fuck them, this is my country, and I'm not just going to hand it over to them. It's like every hair on my body stands up and says, absolutely 100% right. Like,
Yeah.
I'm 10 toes down. Like, my ancestors were forced here, right? Their blood is in this soil. Their tears are in this soil. Their body is in the oceans that surround this country, right? And like, how dare I say, maybe it's time to go, right? On the other hand, I'm like, I'm also a storyteller. And stories are only as good as the people that are able to be alive to tell them. And I think that I think that on one of our shows, in the coming weeks, we should really talk about the differences in our feelings based on our race and our gender, and our orientation, because we're dealt with different cards, right? Whereas, we know that when you put on a trucker's hat and sit in the Piggly Wiggly parking lot, like, we wouldn't know one way or the other. Thank God we know, right? But like, I stick out like a sore thumb. I'm not
Yep.
sitting in anybody's Piggly Wiggly parking lot being unbothered, right? And so I think that that too is the reality of also what needs to be held and addressed, is that those who actually do have more of the ability to blend in, right? I think have more, in my feeling, responsibility. Because those of us, the rest of us, are just in jeopardy from the jump, right? Because we're already found out, right? So I carry that too. And that is something that is, again, child of immigrants, right? If Donald Trump decides tomorrow that he is denaturalizing every naturalized citizen, that's my entire family, right? So it's a different weight and burden
Yep.
and fear that I have, that like I want to be really honest about, because it isn't just like, well, later suckers. It's like, what does it look like?
Yep.
And what are our roles? And how do those
100%.
roles change over time too?
And I think that's exactly right. And that's one of the harder issues with this, right? Because we need to be able to come up with a broad coalition. We need to figure out a way to bring together from all different walks of life in order to come together. And there's been a certain level of division that capitalism has created that pits us against one another. And in actuality, a lot of that division and a lot of what we've dealt with over the past 20 years, especially, has been dividing people based on who can have a slice of the capitalist pie. Who's allowed to have it, who isn't allowed. And that's been the same for capitalism all along. It's just become more pronounced over the past a couple of decades here. And I think that you have to be able to both fight for a broad coalition, which is what will secure this thing and what will actually fight against it, while also understanding a lot of people are in the crosshairs. and what do they do? And how do we take care of them? And, how do we sort of deal with this? And again, I'm a white dude. Listen, I have a lot of responsibility in order to fight against the thing that people like me have created. And on top of that, that has literally ground my loved ones to dust. Like, I have a lot of feelings of like, man, my family has been in a class war since my family's been here. And they have been
Mm.
chewed up, spit out, led to early graves, have suffered so much. So for me, I feel those sort of feelings. I think this would be a fascinating discussion for us to have, actually, about the ways that that sort of shows up. And I think that will help with like the categorization of how we're feeling about it and where we go. But in terms of like making our way through this, I you know what it makes me think of, Danielle?
Mm.
It makes me think of during the war on terror, that bullshit color coded warning system, that was like used constantly just to
Yeah.
manipulate it. We actually probably need to come up with sort of a fascist color coded warning system of
Oof.
like what's happening, where are things, what exactly, where are we on this sort of spectrum that I think could help people who are the most vulnerable and in crosshairs for this. It's just something that's sort of percolating in my mind now. But it begins again, I think, with the grounding and the understanding of the situation and finding space within yourself in the midst of like growing chaos and violence and also insanity. Like actual
Yeah.
insanity.
Actual insanity.
Actual insanity is ramping up at a level that like is quite frankly very troubling right now.
I mean, it's just like, I don't know, to watch that portions of that cabinet meeting, I was just like outdone. I was
Yeah.
outdone with the like I'm like, what are you people looking at? Like, what are you actually hearing? Like, it's sick. It's really like it's sick and it's terrifying. To watch them just throw themselves at Donald Trump and just like be at his feet and at his mercy and like there's no one better, there's no one smarter, there's no one better looking, there's no one stronger, like there's no one sexier. Like it's just sick. Like, it's really, really sick. But I do love the idea, Jared, of some type of map, of some type of threat level, that allows us to understand, like, where we are in the grand spectrum of things, where we are grounding ourselves in the grand spectrum of things, whether or not we are at ground zero, whether or not we are at threat level one, and then what how do you move depending on what stage and color and place that you're in?
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's something that we're going to have to figure out in general because normalcy bias fucks this whole thing up. Like we've even seen with like natural disasters and sort of climate catastrophes, there's still like an ingrained idea of like, well, we're American, we're of a certain status, we live a certain place, we're not going to be, we're not going to deal with it. And then people suffer because they don't necessarily recognize what's going on. And I think what I would like to say real fast before we get ready to bounce off of here, which is one of the reasons I appreciate you and one of the reasons why I think we get along is because we treat this thing seriously. Like
Yeah.
there are peddlers on each side of the spectrum of this thing. There are people who are peddling false hope, who are telling people, "Oh, this investigation will do it. This scandal will do it. This prosecutor will do it." Then there are other people on the other side of it that see an opportunity to profit off of fear mongering. Right? Every single thing is then like DEFCON level 1. And so I appreciate that we have navigated this in this way. And I think as this thing progresses, I think that sort of treatment is what we're going to have to like lean into as well as talking about sort of the mental state of things.
Yeah, 100%. I think that is absolutely valid and right. Like, you know, I think that again, in the coming weeks, I want people to mentally, physically, and emotionally prepare for this violent escalation that we are going to see and going to experience. And I think that, you know, understanding who your allies are, what community looks like for you, what safe havens can be created inside of the spaces that you are living in and existing in, because you're going to need to know, right? Um, and I think that, like, what we are going to watch is going to be like watching the insurrection in slow motion, but like it not being in Washington, D.C., it being like at your town center.
Yep.
And that is like, so then what do we do? So I
I
think that these are going to be important conversations, um, for us to continue having.
I completely agree, and it comes down to one of the things we keep talking about, which is just finding a center, finding joy, and replenishing so that you can make decisions that are outside, like, it understands the chaos and the violence. It understands the threat, but it isn't acting out of an activated state, which, by the way, is what capitalism wants from us, what social media wants from us, what all the algorithms want from us. It's starting to figure out how to build that internal state in which we can make decisions. And that includes like whether we stay or go, what type of coalitions we build, how it is that we fight this thing, and just how we move forward, how we plan. We can't plan, we can't organize if we're all in that giant agitated state. We have to create some semblance of grounding and peace within ourselves. That's the only way forward.
It's the only way forward.
The only
I
way forward.
appreciate you, my friend, so much. Please stay safe on your travels. Folks, we will not be live next Wednesday, but we will be back the following week.
The Wednesday after, we will be back. I will miss you. I will miss having this conversation. My friend, check in with me. Let me know how things are going. I'll check in
I
with you.
absolutely will. I absolutely will. Stay well, stay safe, to you and to everyone watching.
All right, everybody. Be safe.